Hi there, Michelle here from McQuaid TV. We're helping you find ways to move from functioning to flourishing by putting the latest science to the real-world test. To help us today, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Amelia Lartey. Amelia is a researcher and social activist with a special interest in applied psychology and exponential technology. She has a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and she researches the Finnish character strength of Sisu, which denotes extraordinary determination in the face of adversity. Amelia gave a TEDx talk on her work, which has been featured in Business Insider, The Scientific American and Forbes, and she's currently pursuing a PhD where she's seeking to create practical, empowering programs that alleviate human suffering and increase well-being on a global scale. You can see why she's my kind of girl. Her future work involves leveraging emerging virtual reality and augmented reality technologies to create psychological applications that empower trauma survivors and promote healing. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
It's so great to have you here. Now, I was fortunate enough to see you a couple of years ago at the World Congress of Positive Psychology, first presenting some of your new research on Sisu. So can you tell us, what is Sisu for those of us who haven't heard?
Great. It's great to hear that you were there, Michelle. It was the first time I ever gave a presentation, so it was a very special moment for me.
You did so well. So tell us more about it.
So Sisu is this Finnish construct that we've had for thousands of years, and it refers to this very dogged determination, and when you feel that you face the end of your perseverance or your physical or mental abilities, and you find this extra strength to push on from that moment. So not quitting when you really feel that this is the end.
So I think all of us can use a little bit more of that. You talked that day about sort of how it connected to resilience and grit. And I think certainly most of us are aware of resilience. Grit, I think people are growing more aware of, that passion and perseverance for their long-term goals. But where does Sisu kind of sit into this family of hanging on when we need to?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So first, if we think about grit, which is passion and perseverance for a long-term goal. So Sisu is more about something that happens in the moment. So it's more about the short-term intensity than about the long-term stamina, what grit is about. I mean, I would say that they're more similar than they're different. But if we want to really understand this human experience and how we survive through adversities and tough times, we need to have this more nuanced understanding of the human endurance and ability to push on. So Sisu is something that enables you to keep on going when things get really tough. Resilience is this ability to bounce back from adversity. So it's our ability to respond positively to a trauma or a tragedy. So before you get to the point when you can start anew, you get your head back above the surface, you oftentimes need to first survive the undercurrents or something that's pulling you back into really difficult adversities and moments in your life. So Sisu is kind of that an extra power tank or a rocket backpack. I don't know, maybe that's the way of describing it.
I think that's a great way to describe it. Why do you think the Finnish in particular have, developed this character strength of Sisu, and is it relevant to the rest of us?
Oh, it's very relevant to all of us, and we all share it. It's a universal capacity. I guess kind of to understand why Sisu became this Finnish construct, and we have this very particular word for it, you have to kind of go back and look at the history. So Finland has been sandwiched between Sweden and Russia, and the people in Finland have faced certain adversities throughout their history. So Sisu always seemed to kind of relate to the context in some ways. So when we're facing these really difficult times, we learn quickest through observing other people. So when we see this example from other humans, how they respond to adversities, whether they kind of lean back or whether you kind of lean forward into the wind, that also gives us an example how to act. And Finns, at some point, they just didn't have any other option but to kind of survive. And that is something that we can see those narratives in all cultures. But I guess maybe there's something to do with this location, at the cold edge of Northern Europe and being the underdog, which maybe gave rise to this construct of Sisu.
So I know your research is still very much in its developing stage. What are your thoughts on how Sisu might actually benefit us at work, for example?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens in the next years to come. I mean, my PhD started last September, and it's very much in the beginning, and I plan to work on Sisu for the rest of my life. So I would see that finding ways how we can tap into this inner strength and what William James calls, he didn't utter the word Sisu, but when he spoke about second wind, so our ability to transform crisis and negative events in our life into something that actually empowers us, could have huge impacts on how we live our lives. And I could see how that translates into work life as well, because we spend most of our life at work, and it's definitely not an easy playground oftentimes. So, I mean, I would really love to see and create these applications that we can really focus on how do we cultivate Sisu in our lives, in our home lives, and in our work lives. So.
And to date, again, recognising that it's early days for you in terms of what you're learning, what are your thoughts on how we might create more Sisu in our lives?
Well, I think it comes down to these very small moments of choice in our lives. So it's kind of like these micro decisions and micro moments when we choose to either take on a challenge. It actually has a huge impact on how we perceive challenges and obstacles in our lives, because they create our future. So let's say if I decide to take on some kind of a sports activity, or if I take on a work opportunity, as opposed to if I don't. I mean, both of those options unfold a new reality in front of my life. So in that way, it's very important that we have these behavioral patterns which are empowering to us.
So, if I'm taking on a new challenge at work, is what you're suggesting that just knowing that I have Sisu to draw on in the first instance might help me feel a little more confident to kind of face into that challenge? And then once I'm in it, if I'm struggling with things, or that perhaps knowing in those moments I have this second win or extra reserve to tap into might be enough to start pulling me through the other side rather than giving up? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think that relates to our sense of autonomy. So all these past events in our lives which have proven us that, okay, Amelia or Michelle, your track record of, surviving, challenges is pretty good. So we're more likely to actually take on new challenges if we have that memory of something that we have actually overcome in the past.
And once we're sort of in the challenge, and again, this sort of knowing we can access this second wind or this extra reserve or rocket pack, I think is hugely helpful in those moments when we're wanting to just quit and give up. Is there anything particular that either you're finding for yourself, or that the research is starting to suggest that people might use as mechanisms during that? So I know, for example, in the grit research, some of what Angela Duckworth has found is the importance of social support in those moments. She was saying every person she'd interviewed who had achieved exceptional things in their field all had moments where they wanted to quit and give up, where that kind of second win was needed, but they also all had stories of where somebody else said, no, don't stop now, keep going, push on, it's worth hanging in. Are you seeing similar things, either again in your own experience or some of the research you're starting to see around Sisu?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned social support, and some examples that I might just take from previous life. We're currently writing a book on Sisu, which is coming out. It's in Finnish, unfortunately, but we interviewed 15 people in Finland of their experiences of facing hardships and how did they survive. And all of those stories have at least one thread in common, which is that there was always some person who was there to see the potential in this human, or was able to give them support in that very critical moment. And we are very deeply interconnected as humans. And it's one of my favorite topics to actually talk about how we can open doors for each other, or we can also close them. So when we see someone who's struggling, I think it's more than, it's our responsibility to see how we can actually help those people tap into their Sisu, instead of kind of fostering this narrative that, okay, you have it, like it's about willpower and Sisu and just go for it. I think it's more important that we think like, how do I as a person help you when you are going through hard times to actually to become your best self, or not even become your best self, but in those moments that you're able to kind of go through whatever it is that you're struggling with.
I think that's so important, whether we're a leader of a team in an organisation, maybe identifying that in our teams, where do we need to give them a little more support, foster a bit more of that Sisu, or whether we're helping our clients. We might see clients going through difficult times or big challenges, or just our peers or colleagues, people we're working alongside of. I know one of the other things that we're seeing in some of the grit research is also the importance of meaning when we take on these challenges. And Angela Duckworth once gave me the example. She said, I'm passionate about ice cream, but I don't need to be very perseverant about my ice cream eating career, for example. And so do you see meaning again? I would imagine that if we're going to find that rocket pack or second wind to kind of dig deeper, what role does meaning play?
This actually reminds me of the work of Viktor Frankl, who spoke a lot about purpose. And I can definitely see this connection between that if I have a sense of purpose in what I'm doing, and that's what Viktor Frankl was also saying about the people who he was observing, that as long as they had this sense of that they were pursuing some kind of a goal greater than themselves, or just the hope of actually being reunited with their loved ones, was that thing that gave birth to this, what I would call Sisu, and you could also call it, this very strong perseverance. Something that came to my mind when you were talking about office space and work is that, and leaders, how important it is to acknowledge the strength in all of us, and kind of giving us the experience of feel that we're seen. So be seen by the people who are around us, and kind of trusting that we all are. We have this ability to overcome whatever the challenge is, and just being there for that moment. I mean, I think there's something that whoever in a customer relationship, if you're able to create that space where a person feels like they're seen as a whole person, I think there's a lot of magic to it.
I completely agree. I think it's one of the tools we underestimate the incredible value of, and yet so simple to do. We just have to be willing to show up and actually look, and then tell people what we see. So what I'm sort of hearing, if I think about how I would use Sisu perhaps in my work after chatting to you today, is there's this piece of it for me, which is almost a bit of a mindset or an attitude that I have this strength. So when I'm perhaps facing into a new challenge, knowing that I have this strength to feel confident I can tackle it, and then in the moment as I'm going through it, almost thinking of it as that rocket pack to kind of power through the obstacles that might come my way. But there's this second really important piece about how do we perhaps support and cultivate Sisu in other people around us too, in looking for it, encouraging it where we maybe need to see them lacking a little bit, or where they're challenged with something, but then, as you were just touching on so beautifully, giving them that feedback of where we've seen them demonstrating Sisu, and reinforcing the fact that we have this ability within us. Does that sound right? Is there anything I'm missing, or other thoughts you've got about how we might use it at work?
I think that sounds perfect. I love it. And just that it's a mindset. So whatever we are able to bring to our awareness is already there to empower us. So knowing that there's more to us than what meets the eye at a given moment is something that can be a game changer in a given moment.
Absolutely. And so just to make sure we're sort of playing with it in effective ways, can we have too much Sisu? Are there times we shouldn't do it?
I think it's kind of like with any ability or quality or even virtues, that it should be informed by reason. So you definitely can have too much Sisu. And what that may lead to is that you stick too long in a situation that can actually be harmful. This can be a work environment that's not good for you. It can be a relationship. So always kind of making sure that you are adjusting your actions and behavior according to whatever the environment is that you are at. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing enables life in the future, so that it enables this sustainable behavior, then it's actually good for you as well.
I think context and outcome are everything with any of the positive psychology tools we play with. Yeah. This situation for this outcome, what's going to serve me best? Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you'd like more on Amelia's work, or to stay up to date with how the research on Sisu is unfolding, head on over to amelialati.com. And of course, if you're looking for other tested, practical and playful ways to move from functioning to flourishing at work, then be sure to stop by michellemcquaid.com, leave your name and email address so you can hear all our news first. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you are good enough, so don't be afraid to let your strengths shine. Until next time, take care.